Okay. Hello, my name is Jared McNett, and I'm a political reporter for the Sioux City Journal and frequent guest on the On Iowa Politics podcast. I'm here today to chat with Republican Bob Henderson, who is running in Iowa House District 2 against incumbent Steve Hansen. Hello, Bob.
Good morning. How are you, Jared?
Doing well. So I think maybe the easiest way to start is to just get a little background about you for folks who might not know you. So how old are you? What sort of work do you do, and where do you live?
I'm 72. I am a native of Pennsylvania, but I moved to Iowa. My family and I moved to Iowa in 1989, so we've been here for a number of years. And I professionally, I have a lot of background in a lot of different areas, but mainly they are educational related. I spent 35 years teaching public school, but I've also taught everything through graduate school in mathematics and done a number of things in education. I served as a college football coach for about 10 years and have done lots of other things as well.
With that kind of wide array of differing experiences, what are some of your proudest achievements to this point?
Oh my. Well, athletically, as it goes back to high school and college, I was a recruited athlete in college, both in football and track. And but in high school, I was an all-state performer in football as well as track. And then about 10 years ago, I actually was inducted into the Pennsylvania All Sports Hall of Fame, and was quite honored to do that. I was grateful to be able to do that while my parents were still with me, and so they got to enjoy it as well. I've had a number of experiences in coaching that have given me awards, but I've also had a number of experiences in teaching. I was and I don't say this lightly, but I was an outstanding teacher in all of the times that I spent in education. And many of my students, I'm fortunate to have quite about probably around 3,000 students in the area right now who I bump into from time to time, and I'm grateful to see them. So that just kind of gives a little bit of an overview.
Mhm. Yeah, and then what, with all those different experiences and everything like that, what made you want to run for the legislature in this cycle?
Yeah, well, not only this cycle, but this is actually my fourth run,
Mhm.
and I was motivated by, and I'm still motivated, frankly, by a real desire and to see our children get a good education for the purpose of benefiting and helping our nation and our state, certainly. That would be a large motivation, and there's a lot that falls into that. There's a whole lot of things that build into that, but that would be something that would be rather central. I've worked for a number of years for Senator Grassley since I retired from teaching, that is full-time teaching, and I've gotten to really get a lot of experience with what state needs are, with a lot of things that are concerned to not only the individuals and the citizens of this state, but also business leaders, community leaders, governmental leaders across the region of them. I was responsible and have been responsible for about 20 counties in the Northwest Iowa, so it's really been helpful.
And then drilling down a little more, if you were to be elected this time in November, what issues would you make your top priorities in 2023?
Sure. Yep. My one of my top issues is that I truly believe that our parents, again, need to be given a lot more authority when it comes to deciding how their children should be educated. Right now, many of them do not, and would like that. They would like to have authority, but they cannot have it. They don't have the resources to be able to do it, and many of them may be even placed in a situation where they cannot do it. So I really want to work on that, and that's not just for that isolated maybe central idea, but it goes to the strength of our state and the strength of our nation that we're able to do that. I'd like to see us continue also with the move that we've been undergoing for the last couple of sessions to help our economy as best we can in the state. We don't have total control over everything in the economy, but what we can do is continue with the tax reduction that we have. But tax reduction has to come along with spending diminishment, which means that we need to really become much more accountable so that we're eliminating wasteful spending. That also means that we have to work to reduce regulations that are needless and useless regulations, but also to encourage much better accountability in what we're doing. Another thing that is of concern to me is the whole idea of, and this falls in with regulations, but the whole idea of tort reform. I think that there are ways now that juries are awarding very, very almost unlimited amounts to plaintiffs that have increased the costs, especially in the medical fields. And so I think we need to look at those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, kind of drilling down on one of those, what's you mentioned some kind of wasteful spending and some regulations that are maybe a little onerous. What would be one of those to you that maybe could be gotten rid of or done away with?
Sure. My experience in education shows me a lot of that which has happened, especially in the public education realm, that can probably learn from private education, which has to really count every penny that they use. And things that are even as simple as one year, as I was teaching, I had a need for more chairs in my room. There were more students who had been assigned to my classes than I had seats for them. So I went to the custodians and I asked if we could get some more, and they said, no, we don't have any, but we know where there are some. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, if you bring a pickup truck or something, what we can do is go get them, and we know where they are. And I said, okay. So I did, and we went over to an unused school, and the place was just full of student desks. I mean, piled high in these classrooms. And I said, well, where are all these student desks from? They said, well, these are the desks that were removed from the schools that we're building new schools for. And I said, well, then why, we've already built the schools, why aren't the desks back? And they said, oh, well, they bought all new desks. I said, well, these are perfectly good desks. What's going to happen with them? They said, we don't know. They're just going to sit here. And, those are the kinds of things that I don't know that happens as well. It happens as much in the private sector as what happens in the public sector, because the public sector oftentimes doesn't have the kind of accountability for its income as happens. Now that's a very, I mean, that probably was somewhere close to $1 million in expense, but nevertheless, that's a small expense in comparison to others that go on. I think in the realm of many regulations, and I'm not familiar with all of them, but I do know that there are a lot of needless regulations that I hear from farmers and truck drivers and others that just don't make a lot of sense. Sometimes what we do is we empower people to sit in positions where they feel they have to do something, and they make regulations that are kind of onerous on the people in the workforce. So there's a lot to be done there. And I think we need to really look hard at those types of things in a more specific way and try to alleviate them.
And then kind of going off of that and what you're sort of wanting to prioritize, what do you believe most greatly sets you apart from your opponent in this race, Mr. Hansen?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that question. Could you?
Yeah, what you mentioned your priorities. What would you say ultimately kind of sets you apart from your opponent in this race, Mr. Hansen?
Well, in the education field, I think Mr. Hansen's main interest is in funding of education. In fact, I'm convinced of that. My main interest is in doing what is best for students in that. and so, for instance, Mr. Hansen voted no to reopen the schools. He has voted no on a number of things that would have encouraged. Let me just see here. He voted no on a decision to open the schools to go to 100% in school. He's voted no to establish charter schools in the state. Charter schools are public schools, but they offer a choice for people. And he voted on that. He voted no on a repeal of mask mandates. All of those kinds of things are important to the teaching situation. I've stood in front of classes for 30 some years, and I know how students learn. And his interest is in funding schools. My interest is in promoting education for students. That would be that's one of the things that really sets us apart. It sounds to a lot of people that we're on the same page, but we're not. That's really important. He has stood completely behind organizations that are only interested in funding things like teacher salaries and so on and so forth. I'm not against teacher salary increases, but certainly that's not what drives education. So I think the biggest, I'm convinced that the largest difficulties are on that. The other thing that separates us, I believe, is that I have always stood on principle. I think negotiations and are for how to get things done, not on principle. He quite frequently has argued against measures that were certain to pass, and then he goes and votes for them just for political purposes. I won't do that. If I am, if I'm decidedly against something, that's the way I'm going to vote, win or lose. And it's important to do those kinds of things, to be responsible for that. He argued, for instance, on the floor of the House vehemently against the tax decrease that we just had, including a tax reduction on seniors who are retired. And then he voted for it because he realized it was going to pass. That's not something I'll do. And that's a distinct difference, I think, between us.
So kind of interwoven with all of that, then ultimately, why do you think voters should choose you in November?
I think because I will work extraordinarily, excuse you, I will work extraordinarily hard to find out what it is that's the concern of our voters and our citizens, really, and to work hard to, for an abundant life, I guess I would say, for our citizens, for our communities. We have probably one of the richest opportunities for a good life here in the state of Iowa. We don't want to lose that. And we can easily lose that with heavy regulations, with making decisions on things that are just don't make any sense. We have right now we have by the truckload poisons coming into our state and in our country, coming across the border in the form of fentanyl and other illicit drugs. We need to strengthen, for example, the Poison Control Center for the state of Iowa, which is actually located right here in Sioux City. One of the things that I had have a disagreement on with the state legislature's actions at the end of the last session was that they turned down an increase in the budget for that center because I think it was probably a zealous oversight on their part, but that's what they did. But we need to make sure that we're funding things that are proper without being extravagant with what we're doing. And I think one of the most courageous things that I saw happen in the last couple of years was when two stalwart fiscal conservatives, Bill Anderson and Rick Bertrand, spearheaded the 4-lane project for Route 20. And they did that with it, and it included a tax increase for which they took a lot of heat. But the long-term effect of that has shown that it has been really well offset economically and in lots of other ways. So that's what I will bring to the legislature, is a fiscal conservatism, but with practical thought process.
Okay, Bob Henderson, thank you for your time.